Most people think presence comes from a title, a corner office, a nameplate on the door, a seat at the head of the table. But position is assigned. Presence is earned. You've seen it before. Someone walks into a room with an impressive resume and a louder voice to match. They mention their rank within the first few minutes. They drop names. They lean back like the space belongs to them. On paper, they outrank everyone there. Yet somehow, the room feels restless. People nod, but their eyes drift. The energy is thin. Then someone else enters. No announcement. No introduction beyond a simple name. They sit down, listen, and say very little at first. But the air changes. Conversations tighten. Jokes get shorter. Even the loudest person lowers their volume without realizing it. Nothing about this second person screams authority. And yet, everyone feels it. That difference is presence. Position depends on external validation. It requires structure, an organization chart, a chain of command. Take away the setting, and the power can fade. The manager in the office may struggle at a family gathering. The executive who commands meetings might feel invisible in a room of strangers. Their influence is tied to the frame around them. Presence doesn't need a frame. It shows up in posture, in how someone holds eye contact without trying to dominate, in how they listen without fidgeting or checking their phone, in the way they respond instead of react. There's a steadiness that can't be faked for long. It comes from experience, from discipline, from having faced pressure and survived it. A Navy SEAL doesn't need to remind people what he's done. The training, the missions, the nights without sleep, the responsibility for lives other than his own. That weight shapes how he moves through the world. He doesn't speak to fill silence. He speaks when there's something worth saying. And when he does, people lean in. Presence is built in moments no one sees. Early mornings when quitting would be easier. Hard conversations that most people avoid. Situations where panic would be natural, but composure is chosen instead. Over time, those decisions carve something into a person. It's subtle, but it's real. Others pick up on it, even if they can't explain why. Position often relies on volume. Presence relies on control. The person who needs to remind you of their authority is usually unsure of it. The person who constantly asserts their expertise often fears being questioned. They stack credentials like armor. But armor is heavy, and it rattles when you move. Presence is lighter. It doesn't clank. It doesn't draw attention to itself. It's the calm voice during an argument that slows everything down. It's the steady hand during a crisis when others are scrambling. It's the individual who can say, "Here's what we're going to do," without raising their voice, and everyone follows. In high-pressure environments, this difference becomes obvious. Titles blur when things go wrong. The real leader is the one who stays clear-headed, the one who scans the room, processes information, and makes a decision without ego getting in the way. In those moments, people don't care about job descriptions. They look for stability. Presence creates trust. Position demands compliance. Trust is stronger. When someone with presence speaks, they don't oversell. They don't exaggerate. They state the facts as they see them. If they don't know something, they admit it. That honesty builds credibility faster than any impressive introduction ever could. People relax around them because there's no performance to decode. You can't borrow presence. You can't rent it for a meeting or fake it for long. It's the byproduct of internal work. Self-awareness, restraint, accountability, the willingness to take responsibility without deflecting blame. Over time, people learn to recognize it. It feels grounded, solid, safe. And when someone with real presence steps into a room where others are trying to control the narrative through status and noise, the shift is immediate. Conversations become sharper. Posturing looks obvious. The difference between someone who holds a position and someone who holds themselves with quiet strength becomes impossible to ignore. Presence speaks before a single word is said. In most rooms, attention feels like a prize. People chase it without admitting they are. They interrupt. They lean forward a little too aggressively. They laugh a little too loudly. They make sure their story is bigger, sharper, more impressive than the last one told. It's subtle sometimes, but the competition is there. Who can command the most eyes? Who can own the floor the longest? The strange part is that the people who truly have confidence rarely join that race. Real confidence doesn't need a spotlight. It doesn't depend on constant validation. It doesn't grow louder when challenged. Instead, it stays steady. It listens. It waits. It chooses its moments carefully. When someone is secure in who they are, silence doesn't threaten them. They don't feel the urge to fill every pause. They can let others talk without mentally preparing a comeback or a correction. They don't scan the room to see who is watching them. They aren't calculating how each word will boost their image. Their energy isn't scattered across the room. It's contained. You can see the difference in body language. The insecure person often leans forward in a way that demands recognition. They nod excessively when speaking, as if seeking agreement in real time. Their voice may rise at the end of sentences, asking for approval even when they don't realize it. The confident person sits comfortably, shoulders relaxed, breathing even. When they speak, their tone doesn't spike to grab attention. It stays level. They don't rush to prove a point. They explain it clearly and let it stand. Competition for attention is usually rooted in doubt. If I'm not noticed, do I matter? If I'm not the most interesting person here, am I falling behind? That kind of thinking turns every interaction into a performance. And performances are exhausting. Real confidence frees a person from that cycle. It comes from knowing your value isn't decided by how many people are looking at you in this moment. It's built on competence, on preparation, on experience that doesn't need to be advertised. Think about someone who has operated under real pressure. A Navy SEAL in a mission where mistakes cost lives. In those situations, attention is not a trophy. It's a liability. Drawing unnecessary focus can compromise the team. Survival depends on calm execution, not dramatic gestures. That training rewires how a person sees influence. You don't chase attention. You control yourself. In a corporate boardroom or a heated community meeting, that mindset stands out. While others compete for the microphone, the confident individual studies the room. They observe who is emotional, who is uncertain, who is posturing. They gather information instead of broadcasting noise. When they finally speak, it's concise. No wasted words. No exaggerated claims. And because they haven't been fighting for attention, people are more willing to give it when they do speak. The room senses that this person isn't trying to dominate. They're trying to contribute. There's also restraint in real confidence. It doesn't need to win every argument. It doesn't correct every minor mistake. It chooses battles with care. The insecure mind feels threatened by disagreement. The confident mind evaluates it. Is this worth engaging? Will this move the situation forward? That restraint creates gravity. Others begin to lean in naturally, not because they're being forced, but because they're curious. They want to hear from the person who isn't scrambling for airtime. Attention-seeking often masks fear. Fear of being overlooked. Fear of being ordinary. Fear of losing relevance. Real confidence dissolves that fear. It understands that relevance is earned through substance, not volume. There's a quiet strength in letting others talk themselves into corners, in allowing exaggerated claims to hang in the air long enough for their weaknesses to show. The confident person doesn't rush to expose them. They know the truth doesn't need aggressive marketing. When someone truly believes in their abilities, they don't oversell them. They don't repeat them in every introduction. They don't anchor every story back to themselves. They can give credit freely. They can admit uncertainty without feeling smaller. They can step back and still remain solid. And in a room full of people competing for recognition, the one who isn't chasing it often becomes the most respected presence there. Ego is loud. It reacts fast. It wants credit, control, and the final word. Discipline is different. It's quiet. It holds back. It thinks before it moves. And when the pressure rises, discipline is the one that stays standing. In a room where people are competing for dominance, ego usually takes the lead. Someone challenges an idea, and the response is immediate and sharp. A suggestion is ignored, and pride feels wounded. Voices get tighter. Faces harden. The goal shifts from solving the problem to protecting identity. Discipline doesn't operate from that place. A disciplined person can feel the sting of being questioned and still choose a measured response. They don't confuse disagreement with disrespect. They don't interpret every interruption as an attack. There's a gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap, they make a decision. That gap is power. Ego collapses the gap. It reacts instantly. It interrupts. It escalates. It needs to reassert control as quickly as possible. In the short term, that can look strong. A forceful rebuttal can silence a room. A bold claim can intimidate opposition. But it's unstable. It depends on constant reinforcement. Discipline is stable. It's built long before the room ever fills up. It's built in early mornings when no one is watching. In training sessions that feel repetitive and exhausting. In moments when quitting would be easy but the person continues anyway. A Navy SEAL doesn't rely on ego to get through training. Ego burns out. Discipline carries you through the 5th mile, the cold water, the lack of sleep. That kind of conditioning changes how someone handles conflict. When you've endured controlled chaos by design, a tense meeting doesn't shake you. When you've been pushed to your limits and forced to function anyway, criticism feels small by comparison. Ego wants to win the moment. Discipline wants to win the mission. In discussions, ego often seeks applause. It wants recognition for being the smartest voice in the room. It may exaggerate achievements or subtly undermine others to look superior. Discipline doesn't care about applause. It cares about outcomes. If someone else has the better idea, discipline supports it. If staying silent serves the objective, discipline stays silent. That doesn't mean discipline is passive. It's precise. When it speaks, it's intentional. When it challenges, it's focused on the issue, not the person. There's no unnecessary heat behind it. Ego personalizes everything. Discipline separates emotion from execution. You can see the difference when plans start to fall apart. The ego-driven individual looks for someone to blame. They protect their image first. They distance themselves from failure. Their energy goes toward damage control. The disciplined person looks for solutions. They assess the situation without panic. They take responsibility for their part, even when it's uncomfortable. They adjust and move forward. There's no dramatic display, no need to defend their reputation in the moment. Over time, people learn who they can rely on. Ego might shine in calm conditions. It thrives when things are easy and the spotlight is available. But under sustained pressure, it cracks. It gets defensive. It gets reactive. It loses clarity. Discipline sharpens under pressure. Stress activates training. Emotions are acknowledged but not obeyed. Decisions are made based on principle, not pride. There's also humility in discipline. Not the forced kind where someone downplays their strengths. Real humility. The understanding that there's always more to learn. That skill must be maintained. That success today doesn't guarantee success tomorrow. Ego believes it has arrived. Discipline knows it's always in progress. In a room full of strong personalities, the ego-driven individuals may dominate the early conversation. They'll set the tone with confidence that borders on aggression. But as discussions deepen and complications surface, cracks appear. Overreactions. Defensiveness. Shifting blame. The disciplined person remains steady. Consistent tone. Clear thinking. Controlled pace. They don't need to overpower the room because they're not fighting for identity. They're focused on execution. And when decisions have to be made, when the noise has run its course and reality sets in, it's usually the disciplined voice people look toward. Most people underestimate silence. They mistake it for weakness, uncertainty, or lack of preparation. In a tense room, silence can feel uncomfortable, even threatening. So someone fills it. Then someone else talks over them. The volume rises. The pace quickens. Control seems to belong to whoever speaks the most. But silence, used with intention, can reset everything. When a discussion starts spiraling, the instinct is to push harder, to clarify louder, to defend faster. Yet that usually feeds the chaos. Words stack on top of words until no one is actually listening. They're just waiting for their turn to respond. A person who understands silence doesn't rush to join that cycle. Imagine a heated exchange. Two people arguing across a table. Accusations layered with emotion. Others shifting in their seats. Then someone who has been quiet finally speaks. Not to shout. Not to compete. Just one calm sentence. Then silence again. That pause forces the room to recalibrate. Silence creates space. Space to think. Space to notice tone. space to feel the weight of what was just said. Without silence, conversations blur into noise. With it, each word gains definition. A Navy SEAL learns quickly that unnecessary noise can be dangerous. In operations, sound reveals position. It creates risk. Silence becomes a tool for awareness. You listen more than you speak. You observe before you act. That habit carries into everyday life. You don't waste words because you don't need to. In a boardroom or community meeting, silence has a similar effect. When someone refuses to react immediately, it disrupts the rhythm of ego. The person who expected pushback suddenly has to sit with their own statement. The room, used to rapid exchanges, feels the shift. Silence can also expose insecurity. The person who cannot tolerate it will rush to fill it. They'll backtrack, over-explain, or double down unnecessarily. In doing so, they reveal more than they intended. The one who stays quiet gains information without effort. This doesn't mean silence is avoidance. Avoidance is passive. Intentional silence is active. It's a decision not to engage on impulse. It's choosing to let the temperature drop before speaking. It's understanding that not every comment deserves an immediate response. There's discipline in holding your tongue when you know you could dominate the conversation. There's strength in allowing others to exhaust their arguments. When they finish, and the room settles, a measured response carries far more weight than a rapid-fire rebuttal ever could. Silence also signals confidence. If you're secure in your position, you don't panic when the spotlight shifts away from you. You don't scramble to stay relevant. You can sit back, hands still, expression neutral, knowing that when you decide to speak, it will matter. In conflict, silence can lower defenses. When someone expects a fight and doesn't get one, their aggression often softens. They may repeat their point, but with less intensity. They may even begin to question their own certainty. The absence of resistance can be disarming. There's another layer to it. Silence sharpens listening. Most people listen to reply. They catch a few keywords and start forming their counterargument. A disciplined silence means you actually absorb what's being said. You hear tone changes. You notice hesitation. You pick up on what isn't being stated directly. That awareness gives you leverage. When you finally respond, you address the real issue, not just the surface complaint. The room feels the precision. Silence can also restore order when discussions drift. A long pause before answering a question signals that you're considering it seriously. Others instinctively wait. The pace slows. The emotional charge decreases. It becomes harder for anyone to justify shouting into a calm space. Over time, people begin to associate your silence with thoughtfulness rather than weakness. They realize that if you're quiet, you're assessing. If you speak, it's deliberate. That reputation changes the power dynamic without a single aggressive move. In rooms where control seems tied to volume and speed, the person who can sit comfortably in silence holds a different kind of authority. Some people announce their authority the moment they walk in. They reference their title. They remind everyone of their experience. They make sure the hierarchy is clear before the conversation even begins. It's direct, sometimes subtle, sometimes not. The message is the same. I'm in charge here. But real authority doesn't need that introduction. You can feel it before it's stated. It shows up in posture, in pacing, in how someone carries themselves without scanning the room for approval. There's no rush to establish dominance. No need to over-explain credentials. The confidence sits naturally, without decoration. Announced authority depends on recognition. It needs others to agree with it, to acknowledge it openly. Felt authority operates differently. It doesn't demand acknowledgement. It assumes responsibility and lets behavior speak. Think about the difference between someone who constantly reminds you they're the leader and someone who simply starts organizing the situation when things get chaotic. The first may have the official role. The second has the room. A Navy SEAL rarely needs to explain what they've endured. The training alone reshapes how they show up in the world. Long hours under physical strain. Decision-making under pressure where hesitation has consequences. Accountability not just for themselves, but for the team. That weight changes how they stand, how they listen, how they respond. When that kind of person walks into a tense environment, they don't posture. They assess. They look at exits without making it obvious. They observe dynamics before speaking. Their calm isn't performative. It's practiced. People notice even if they can't name why. Authority that is felt comes from consistency. It's built over time through aligned actions. When someone says they'll handle something and then does it repeatedly, trust forms. When they stay composed in minor stress and major stress alike, credibility grows. When they admit mistakes without deflecting blame, respect deepens. Announced authority often leans on fear. There's an implied consequence if you don't comply. Felt authority leans on trust. People follow because they believe in the judgment behind the decision. You can see this clearly when disagreements arise. The person relying on position may react defensively when challenged. Their tone sharpens. They assert their rank. They remind everyone who has the final say. It may silence opposition temporarily, but it rarely builds loyalty. The person with felt authority handles challenge differently. They don't interpret disagreement as disrespect. They let the other person finish. They consider the point. If the idea has merit, they incorporate it. If it doesn't, they explain their reasoning without aggression. Their composure reinforces their standing. Authority that is announced can evaporate when the setting changes. Take away the formal structure, and it weakens. Authority that is felt travels with the person. It works in a conference room, at a community meeting, or in a crisis on the side of the road. There's also restraint in it. The need to prove oneself fades. When someone knows their capability, they don't overextend to showcase it. They don't turn every discussion into a demonstration of expertise. They contribute where it counts and stay quiet where it doesn't. That restraint creates gravity. Others begin to look toward them naturally when decisions need to be made. Not because they demanded it, but because their past behavior suggests reliability. Over time, their words carry weight without added volume. Felt authority is grounded in self-control. It requires managing emotions before managing others. It requires clarity of thought when others are reactive. It requires patience when conversations slow down. Those qualities can't be faked consistently. They're the product of internal discipline. In a room full of strong personalities competing for control, the person who doesn't chase control often ends up holding it. Their steadiness contrasts with the volatility around them. Their measured tone cuts through the noise. Their decisions are accepted with less resistance because they're seen as considered, not impulsive. Authority, when real, doesn't need a reminder. It's evident in how someone moves, listens, and acts under pressure. Noise can dominate a room for a while. Fast talkers, big claims, sharp interruptions. It creates the illusion of control. If you're the loudest, the quickest, the most assertive, it can feel like you're steering everything. But noise is fragile. It depends on momentum. It feeds on reaction. It needs constant reinforcement to survive. The moment something solid enters the space, something steady and unshaken, the volume starts to feel unnecessary. When true strength enters a chaotic room, it doesn't compete with the noise. It doesn't try to outshout it. It doesn't mock it. It simply stands firm, and that firmness exposes how unstable the chaos really is. Picture a tense discussion that's been spiraling for 20 minutes. Voices layered over each other. Opinions repeated with more force each time. People defending positions they didn't fully think through, just because backing down now would look weak. Then someone new walks in. Calm posture. Measured steps. They don't rush to claim the floor. They sit. They listen. Their expression doesn't mirror the tension. It absorbs it without reacting. The room senses it immediately. True strength carries a different energy. It's not aggressive. It's grounded. There's no edge of desperation to it. No need to win approval. That contrast alone makes the surrounding noise feel excessive. A Navy SEAL walking into a heated civilian argument doesn't need to reference their training. They don't need to describe what they've survived. The way they hold themselves communicates enough. Controlled breathing. Still hands. Eyes that scan without darting. That composure under pressure shifts the emotional temperature. People often escalate because they think escalation equals power. If I speak faster and louder, I'll dominate. But when someone remains unshaken by that tactic, escalation loses its effect. The shouting meets a wall that doesn't push back, and without resistance to fuel it, it starts to fade. True strength also has patience. It doesn't rush to correct every exaggeration. It allows others to reveal their instability. When someone is posturing, their confidence is usually surface level. A steady presence makes that surface crack. The exaggerated claims begin to sound hollow. The forced laughter feels forced. There's something disarming about calmness and chaos. It makes people aware of their own volume. They hear themselves differently. The room, once buzzing with overlapping voices, starts to slow. Not because anyone ordered it to, but because the contrast becomes uncomfortable. Strength that is real doesn't chase control. It attracts it. People start directing questions toward the steady person. They look for cues. Is this as urgent as it feels? Is this as dramatic as we're making it? The calm presence becomes a reference point. In high-stakes environments, this dynamic is even clearer. When plans go wrong, panic spreads quickly. One anxious voice triggers another. Soon, decisions are being made from fear rather than clarity. The person with true strength doesn't match that fear. They lower their tone. They simplify the situation. They focus attention on what can be controlled. That focus cuts through confusion. Chaos thrives on scattered attention. Strength narrows it. Instead of 10 arguments happening at once, the conversation returns to one issue. Instead of emotional reactions, there are practical steps. The energy condenses. True strength also accepts responsibility without theatrics. It doesn't blame others to protect ego. It doesn't dramatize the difficulty of the moment. It acknowledges reality and moves forward. That steadiness builds trust quickly. The people who were dominating the room with noise often struggle in that shift. Their influence depended on speed and intensity. When the tempo slows and clarity becomes the priority, their tactics lose power. Interruptions feel disruptive instead of commanding. Overstatements feel obvious instead of persuasive. Gradually, the volume drops. The room reorganizes around the calmest person present. Not because they demanded it, not because they silenced anyone, but because stability is magnetic when everything else feels unstable. And once the noise fades, what remains is focus, direction, and a different kind of control that doesn't need to be announced.